Welcome out to another episode of It's All Been Tried Before. This time we're getting artsy, erudite. We're talking about New Frontier, Book 1. Yeah, it's a new generation. Well, if you're here, maybe, actually you may not have watched it, or you can't. It's a book, you gotta read it. But hopefully we'll tell you enough to whet your appetite. Or if you've read it before, hopefully you're here to hear what we got to say about it. Another place you can do that to mix the other things up with us and hear what we got to say about it. Facebook, It's All Been Trucked Before. Follow us out there. It's All Been Trucked Before. Know what the latest episodes are. Maybe tell us what you think of what we're saying. Tell us special episodes you want us to do. Maybe there's some Star Trek adjacent thing we're missing, like the Orville, which we're not missing, but something like that. Throw it out our way. Also, speaking of which, become a Patreon member next week. Our bonus special episode, Patreon only. We're going to watch every sketch, or as many sketches as we can find, referencing Star Trek. We're talking SNL, of course. We're talking Mad TV. We're talking Carol Burnett Show. We're talking In Living Color. I know I'm leaving stuff out. We're talking all that stuff. Go check it out. You'll be amazed at how funny it is, and it's interesting the journey they take. We take the journey through it for you, but you should do it too. Come along with us. Become a Patreon member. Patreon.com/IEBD. And we're going to throw this out. I feel like it's Masterpiece Theater, but it's New Frontier here on It's All Been Trek Before.
Welcome out to a special bonus episode of It's All Been Trek Before. Your regular hosts are here.
This is Stephen.
And I've avoided blowing my load just then.
That was Keith.
Yep.
This is Jimmy-Jerome. We're here to talk Star Trek New Frontier, Book 1 at least, which is called, I forgot, House of Cards. Not to be confused with the Kevin Spacey series.
Yep.
I read all 4 of the original 4 novellas here. Besides House of Cards.
It was New Frontier, right?
New Frontier is the name of the series.
I don't remember being called. No, I guess, it had to have been the same thing.
Yep. House of Cards is book 1. Into the Void is book 2. The Two Front War is book 3. And Endgame is book 4. So I read the whole thing. Keith listened to an abridged audio version of the whole thing. So he missed parts of it, but got through the whole story. And Stephen, you are
got one into
book 2.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you picked books 1 and 3?
A third of book 2.
That would be funny if you skipped book 2. What are your first impressions of what you've read, even understanding that may not have the whole picture?
The first 30 pages, I'm like, it put me in the mind of, and I've read so many Star Trek novels. Not I read Rosati, but back in the early 80s, late 70s, I read so many where maybe you had a little more of this kind of setup, but I actually liked it. That it was like, okay, I'm not seeing any of the normal characters. And once the normal characters, the main character started to show up, I enjoyed that too. I thought once it got into the more, I'll say episodic, although that's not a feature of the book, but as far as feeling like an episode, I thought he shined there for sure. There were a few clunky things here and there, but I think that's, now I'm thinking of novelizations, even though this isn't a novelization, it's novellas based on these characters, but it did make me think of some of the, the James Blish ones and that kind of thing, where sometimes I think it's tricky to adopt them. But I also thought, for the most part, I thought he really captured it. And once I got rolling, it's like, okay. And so, yeah, I'm bummed I didn't get through further in it, because I was really getting into part 2 and the new characters as well. I mean, Shelby's a character we know, but I think we said in that episode, we want to know more about her. And it's cool that, I was enjoying it very much. So that's my extended first impression.
Nice.
First, I want to verify. So what was going on in the beginning of book 1? Was it Shelby going onto the planet?
No, the beginning of book 1 was Calhoun. Flashback to him in his freedom fighter days.
Okay. That is how the audiobook started. Okay. But the sample that I was reading had her going on a mission to retrieve him.
Okay.
Did that happen?
That's after the flashback part.
Interesting.
And then after the admirals had a meeting about who they wanted to be the captain of this mission.
So Keith, you did the audiobook?
Yeah.
Who was
the abridged?
I need to look that up. It was just all 4 parts, and it's It's interesting that you should say that it didn't feel too episodic. For me, because of the way it was being performed, it felt sort of like an episode. I mean, each part, I was like, I can't imagine ending a book on like it felt like there were here's cliffhanger, stinger. They had stingers like throughout the the book. And I was like literal stingers, and I was like, okay,
yeah, that makes sense.
It was pretty well done. The only technical note I would have is that maybe even for myself is I've obviously spent way too much time taking out mouth noise, I guess. Because it's just that kind of I've heard other people do it. They just forge right through it. I can't help but go back, and I can't not hear it, and I can't help but go back and take out each little thing, and and just. But it worked, I guess. Yeah. So, I mean, even like the real episode, you hear Picard whistle every now and then, and like the things, the way that the sound clips occasionally. Sure. Anyway, I need to look this up. Was it anyway? I guess my first impression was that it was hard for me to imagine stopping at book one and getting, and it just didn't feel like a complete.
One was essentially a prologue.
I would expect it to be more, expected them all to be more self-contained, but each one felt like it was just like a commercial break, and then
yeah, I'd say there was like some separation between the books, but book one was essentially a prologue, in my opinion. And then the story really kicked off until book two. I mean, we didn't meet half the main characters until book two. So that to me is like, oh, well, okay. But what I liked about it is it has enough familiar hook in for people that are fans of Next Gen and such that are only there because they want familiar. And then there's a lot of new stuff, but it's familiar enough, right? And Peter David, I'm on the record of saying he's my favorite Star Trek author. One of my favorite authors, period. He's just, the way he writes is so witty and so well done humor-wise. I just really, really like his style. And all the characters do feel a little bit within his voice rather than, maybe we need a little bit, some characters that aren't sarcastic, to differentiate them a bit more, but they do also feel pretty well developed. And I think even the familiar characters like Shelby and Salar, of course, he really found new, interesting ways to go with them. Like he didn't just say, okay, I'm just going to write him exactly what we already saw. I mean, Salar, major departure from the way she'd been portrayed in Next Gen with the whole trauma she goes through in her portion of the prologue. So let's go character by character. The first character I'd say is Captain Mackenzie Calhoun is our lead, or Mackenzie Calhoun. Yeah. Mackenzie of Calhoun, without the vowels, I guess is how you would probably say it. Led his planet to freedom at the age of 17. Apparently he was based partially on Mel Gibson, partially on the main character of Braveheart. I was thinking Alexander the Great, like somebody that accomplishes so much so young. And then what do you do with the rest of their life? Well, which Picard I think is a really great hook for a character. And somebody much less tied to Starfleet ideals than other captains we've met.
But Picard mentioned Alexander in the...
Yes, that's probably why I was thinking of it. So that captain, I really thought it was a strong, interesting character and also unpredictable. And some of the stuff, even when it feels like it might be predictable, then it swerves another direction. Right? Like he keeps you on your toes. In my opinion, anyway, I never quite knew what he was going to do next, which I really liked. How do you think he compares to other Star Trek captains?
So I only got to where he was just kind of, they were still in dry dock. So, but the backstory was interesting. His name sounds like Maress.
I wish I'd made a better note. I had it in my head because I heard them say it so many times. I actually got to hear somebody pronouncing how the names probably were intended to be said, I would imagine. I mean, they usually would get input onto that sort of thing. But you're pretty close. It was something like Mahaka, something. It was and the
it's written like M''K''N''ZY.
Mahaka-Henzi. Yeah, Mahaka-Henzi. That's I think that's
Henzi. Okay.
And I'm trying to remember. They said that the unique pronouns several times, quite a few times for one of the characters. It was something like Shahi, Sahi.
Yeah.
Shahi. Yeah.
Oh, for
and she's
Burgoyne.
Yeah.
Burgoyne, Shahi. Yeah. So I was obviously I was starting with the captain, but we can jump straight to Burgoyne because that is a character that some people don't think has aged well because of the portrayal of the two genders and the way they did it. I kind of disagree. I mean, first of all, you weren't going to see characters in books for the most part those days that had different than the binary male female gender, right? And while it's not what you would want from a non-binary gendered person on Earth in 2024, given that Burgoyne is an alien species, I bought the description of her gender and the way they portrayed it. Hirsch gender and the way they portrayed it. Like the picture of Burgoyne looks a little bit like David Bowie, honestly. But I thought it was that they were kind of a well-written character and a very interesting character that you normally wouldn't have gotten in this time period.
It's her mat is what threw me off.
The way that they, I mean, I'm trying to remember what the pronouns were. It was like, the way they pronounce or portrayed here, it didn't come across to me as offensive when I was listening to it. Not exactly. It felt like, wow, they captured something that will actually be kind of useful as far as actually having these specific pronouns that aren't just they but I think there's something about making the character seem so sexually predatory that kind of felt like, oh, come on. I mean, you can have a little bit more to it than,
Yeah.
That I also think, I mean, they mentioned that species is a sexual species, and I do think you can have a sexual species.
Yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, I get your argument to an extent. But
well,
Peter David definitely made some choices.
All I'm saying is that from what you were saying about it not aging well, I mean, I would feel like this is the thing that would probably start kind of poking people the wrong way and about taking the portrayal too personally or by trying to overlay it onto what we should or should not think of as non-binary and on Earth. God, there's something else.
Flies in the face of canon that gender is binary throughout the universe.
It's true. That's not how Star Trek had established it.
So that storyline, that little bit of the arc, along with quite a few other things, had me thinking along the way, this reminds me of this story, or this reminds me of this other thing, including Universe Journey and the Orville, like that, specifically that there was the character that could do. I don't know if they could influence pheromones in some way, but they certainly seemed to be very hooked into that, and that was the whole thing with we find out
the reason why Kelly cheated on Ed.
Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, and I'm the leader of Perv Corner on this podcast, but also I also think that sex is obviously it's part of life, it's part of the galaxy, and part
kind of
and
begrudgingly.
So I like seeing that in there, and I feel like some of Calhoun's stuff that I read so far was that way. But I feel like it's kind of like a good try, kind of like the Trill episode where Crusher's in love with the guy, and then once the Trill moves, she's like, they went right up to it, and then there was the episode where Riker falls in love with the person that's non-binary. I can't remember that one went right up to the edge, but didn't quite go over. But as we talked about a lot, it's like, well, it was 1992 or 93 or whatever. And, obviously Discovery's gone further with, having a character like this and treating them differently. So, progress.
My opinion on the, was it Crusher before, or was it, wait. Was it Crusher or was it Troy with the...
Crusher dated the Trill.
Crusher dated the
Okay, right.
She was insane about him, and then, or them, I should say.
Yeah.
And then when the Trill moved into she kept justifying like, oh, I'm in love with the mind and all that. And then,
Joy and Trill have gender, like it was a he, and then
the
Trill,
and
then the Trill was transported into a female body and became a she, and Crusher had a problem with that.
But I think it's okay for characters to actually just be heterosexual too. I mean, they don't have to just go like, hey, this isn't going to work.
How dare you? How dare you cancel anybody that's just heterosexual is canceled?
Yeah.
No, you're absolutely right. Of course.
Yeah, and yeah, 1990s guy would just would have it both ways. Like, why aren't they kissing? They just want to see women kissing now.
Yeah. Well, all women are bisexual. That
Right,
kind of thing.
right.
I like a bit of sex in my books, so that's part of the appeal to me.
Yeah.
I'll own up to that for sure.
Yeah.
So I like New Frontiers a little more sexual than
most
some
of
other.
reality TV is based on the same premise as Star Trek. You put a bunch of very physically fit people in a confined space where they're traveling around and they're not seeing. They're limited in who they can see. Essentially, it's a high school in space. Things are gonna happen. So
space, high school.
So Dr. Salar, who's a Vulcan and has always been portrayed very button up, her plot is very sexualized.
Yeah.
Pon far gone wrong. Which again, I think Peter David's like me, like, oh, here's a sex thing. Let's pull on the thread of it and explore it some more. But did you think that hurt her characterization, or were you excited to see another set of Vulcans we don't usually get to see?
Both, for me. Yeah, but
yeah, it was unsettling.
Oh my God! No, absolutely, I was upset by the death during the mind meld. That would be so awful.
A buzzkill.
I mean, I guess it was very awesome because I was like, all right. And then I was like, whoa, what's going on here? Yeah, that's
now 3 of the characters were from a series of young adult novels that Peter David had written previously. So Salita and Mark McHenry and Zach Kebron, they mentioned that they'd gone to the academy together. They're actually in 3 young adult novels featuring Worf at Starfleet Academy. They were the first 3 in the Starfleet Academy series. Worf was only in 3. They rotated different next-gen characters in the series. And they were the study group, the 3 of them, Worf, and a blonde-haired human woman named Tanya Tobias that was probably bland and not developed enough. There was no reason to bring her into New Frontier, in my opinion. Seriously, she was like a cookie-cutter blonde love interest for Worf that was a human and got jealous when he was attracted to Klingon things. But yeah, so they already had in my mind, I already knew these 3 people. Did they feel fully formed, or were they less defined than like Shelby or Salar, who we know had already appeared on screen?
I was going to say that was another thing that jumped out at me immediately is the description of one of them gave me a serious Tilly vibe. I was thinking like Tilly from Discovery. It was like, well, there's another thing. The one that was too chatty.
Too chatty.
Yeah, the character that was like they were describing.
Oh, Robin Leffler?
Yeah, I think so.
That's actually Judd's character from The Next Generation. She was in The Next Generation, an episode.
Huh.
She was a love interest for Wesley. She got less development than any of the other main cast.
Wasn't there somebody else?
But she gets a good story arc later. In subsequent books, she gets a lot more development. But yeah, I felt like she kind of got, if anybody of the main cast got the shaft in this first 4, it was Robin Leffler, which, given how much we loved her character in that episode, was kind of disappointing how little she got in this. But
the narrator was Joe Morton.
Okay, I like that actor.
I wasn't familiar with him. It's interesting. He actually got
Scandal.
Oh, wait, who's he in Scandal?
Olivia Pope's father.
That's his name?
Yeah.
Let me do.
Right? I think he's the guy. He's the main, one of the cops in Speed. That
best known for Terminator 2, Judgment Day, Blues Brothers 2000, Zack Snyder's Justice League.
No, I know him well. I mean, I love him and everything. I just didn't. I guess I'd never realized what his real name was. Just like, oh, it's that guy. Oh my God.
I was looking for Speed. It's gonna take me a minute because he's got quite a few credits.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I always liked Joe Morton. That's interesting they chose him. I didn't know he narrated Star Trek books. He was Lieutenant Herb McMahon in Speed, Captain McMahon in Speed, but he also appeared in Speed 2 Cruise Control, and he was a lieutenant instead of a captain, uncredited. So he was one of the few cast members of Speed to reprise their role in the sequel.
The first thing I remember him in was Terminator 2. I remember being the scientist and holding so what was it? He got to do some I'm not even sure I would call them imitations necessarily, but he was certainly capturing the essence of some of the it got to do like a Picard and a Riker and the Hermat, is that what we're calling them?
Burgoyne.
Yeah, they're just very, very interesting choices for the way to do that. And even they're Burgoyne doing an impression of Scotty, essentially.
Yeah. Because that whole story about how he met Scotty, I don't know if Steven got that far.
Did you?
No.
No.
They just kept teasing at it and going around it and going, wink, wink. You know what we're talking about, right? You know who we're talking about, don't you? Yeah.
So yeah, it's in book 3. He encountered Montgomery Scott at a bar on the planet Argolis 2. Steven, are you familiar with that planet?
I should be.
Wolf in the Fold.
Okay.
So Scotty eventually, in his older age, after Relics, went back to Argolis 2, and that's where Burgoyne met Scotty. And Scotty said, "Forget that synthol, I'll drink this."
Is that where the fight happened, where they do the whole insulting the ship thing, or?
It's the whole Jack the Ripper.
Yes. Yeah. It's not Trouble with Tribbles is what you're asking about.
Okay, right, yeah.
So yeah, like a Forrest Gump with all his credits. Like he was in MASH and What's Happening, and Sanford and Son, but then also later was in Smallville, and Boston Legal. Guys had a good career, and like you said, Scandal. Yeah.
So I'm putting together this cast.
I loved him in that so much.
Oh yeah, he was great. I'm putting together this cast. One thing that stood out to me, I thought was a very interesting choice, was they chose to have 2 Vulcan women in the 9 main characters, which, any Star Trek will have like 2 straight white men other than Discovery, or, Next Gen had 2 white women, had human white women. Well, I guess Deanna was only half human, and you don't blink twice. But to have 2 Vulcan women seemed a very interesting choice, because I thought that what I really liked, though, is I think they did a really good job characterizing the difference between Solita and Salar, that they are very different people.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously Vulcans would have individuals the same way humans would, but because Star Trek so frequently relies on all Klingons are like this, all Vulcans are like this, I like that we're going to get a chance to delve into 2 different Vulcan women.
All Italians talk like this.
Different life.
Some great Spock reads too, actually.
Yeah.
That came up.
So I did take a handful of notes specifically on book 1. We might as well talk about them since that's the one we're definitely... So Xenex and Dentari, the 2 planets, and then of course the Thelonians, or Thelonians, I don't know. They're all new races created for this book series, which I think was probably a smart idea to not mess with stuff we already knew.
Mm-hmm.
Because of canon, or just because of expectations, or what do you think?
Yeah, because of canon. I mean, Next Gen was already off the air at this point. They'd already got 2 movies under the belt. Voyager is well underway, but you still don't want to mess with canon, so...
Well, I mean, what are the rules as far as that goes? Because I think this comes up every now and then.
20 years of, hey man, you can't. These guys were if they use our existing.
Oh, okay.
The original they did too. Yeah, at this point there were still active Star Trek shows on the air, so they weren't allowed to contradict what was on screen. Yeah. Okay. And because New Frontier was happening at the same time as DS9 and Voyager, they had to be careful with what they did.
So officially, they couldn't play fast and loose.
I mean, you couldn't have Picard show up and die. No, I couldn't get into DS9's in the middle of Dominion War. Excalibur should probably make an appearance in the Dominion War, but they don't want to get into that, right? So they just put him in another part of the galaxy. I thought it was interesting the way they play with visions in this series. Mackenzie has almost supernatural abilities at some parts, and he has a vision of Picard. And Steven, did you figure out who the naked blonde woman was his vision was of?
No, I'm trying to think who I thought it was.
He's pointing. Before the end of the 4 books, you will get definitive confirmation that it was Shelby.
Yeah, okay.
Because you got far enough to realize they had a romantic backstory.
I just got to that.
Okay.
Yes.
So I didn't really get the visions, or rather, they didn't include those in the abridged, but he talked about the vision eventually.
Okay.
Which is how I put together what you were talking about.
Yeah. Jack Crusher makes an appearance in the novel, briefly, in the 20-year flashback. Then we did 10-year flashback, and we have Solita, the whole scene with Spock, which felt a little bit extraneous because the whole... I did like, though, that she called him, "Are you Kirk Spock?" And he's like, "I didn't realize I belonged to Kirk," but okay. That was a really good moment.
Yeah.
But I think that was as much to introduce us to Syquan. Did they say Syquan in the audio, or Sequan?
Sequan.
So I think that was as much to introduce us to Sequan as it was to introduce us to Solita. I don't think it's a spoiler to mention that Sequan is a main character in the books. He's in the crew picture in the front cover. So while what you've read, Stephen, is him sneaking onto the ship, he does stay on the ship. What about that book 1 cliffhanger, though? Did you know who it was sneaking up behind Selena in her dorm room?
No.
Did you have to go straight to book 2 because you're like, oh my god, I need to find out who that was?
Actually, yeah. So I read until I fell asleep last night late, and then I woke up. I'm like, I still have to finish book 1, and then it was like 3 a.m. I went ahead and read the first 30 pages of book 2. I was like, I'm here.
Nice.
Let's do this. So yeah, I guess I did. Yeah, it was like I'm gonna keep rolling, and I will say that is one of those things. Like, even in the middle of the night, I'm like, and you had said this, Jimmy. It's kind of an easy read for the most part. It's very, it's however many pages, but it's not tons of. It's not like a small print and a big page or whatever. So,
no, it's real quick.
But yeah, it's a good quick read, as it should be. Yeah.
So I thought that was such a cliffhanger to end the first book on. Was Selena's in her dorm room. Somebody comes up with a gun behind her.
Yeah.
And
yep, stinger.
Stephen, do you think you'll finish this? Do you think either of you might go beyond these 4?
Yeah, I'm gonna definitely at least finish this.
Okay.
Sure. Yeah.
I'm certainly tempted at this point. Seeing Calhoun in action, it just reminded me of Cisco as well. There's something about the vibe, something about the way that the especially the way the characters are reacting toward him toward the end, as far as you've got this style. You're not like the other Starfleet captains, etc.
So I think Sequan reminded me of Neelix a bit from Voyager.
Yeah.
Especially with the sister. I'm like, oh, is the sister gonna be like Kes? I don't know. I will say
that makes a lot of sense.
I just was looking at the list of New Frontier characters on Wikipedia on the series. And I don't know if this will entice you or not, and this is further along than I've read, but eventually, apparently, Lieutenant Eric's and Lieutenant Marest from Star Trek The Animated Series get tossed forward 100 years in time and join the crew. So if you like Eric's and Marest and want to read more about them, they're in later Star Trek New Frontier novels.
Wow.
There's also a character that I always was very intrigued by named Morgan Primus, who is Robin Leffler's mother. And I'm pretty sure Peter David's intention was to make this character number 1, Christine Chapel and Loxana Troy, all in one character. Like, they tried to be like, this is a character that has lived multiple lifetimes and every so often changes identity and has lived as number 1, Nurse Chapel and Loxana Troy in her long, long life.
No, what do you mean?
Now lives as Morgan Primus.
Like
they're all the same person. That she every so often she just like fakes her death and changes her identity.
Interesting.
And that she was like an immortal character. I don't know that's exactly the way they wanted to intend it or not. Oh, and it does look like Tanya Tobias, the classmate of Kebran and Selena and Mark McHenry, eventually does show up in these books.
Wait, I'm sorry. Can you back up? Whose idea was that? And would they? I mean, there's no way they would have let them do that.
Peter David's idea. It's only hinted at. It's never confirmed, but it's never said outright. This is number 1. This is Chapel, but this is a immortal character that says she's lived other lives, and the way she describes her other lives hint at these other characters. And she feels very Majel Roddenberry when you read her.
This may be another Star Wars ripping off Star Trek, but at some point, Morgan Primus's her seemingly immortal body is destroyed during an attack by the Greek gods, but her mind was integrated into the Excalibur computer.
Yes.
Which is
then she becomes the computer, which is Star Trek.
Which makes that.
Right. They're trying to cover all of Magel's characters.
Yes. But they also did that in Solo. They put.
I remember the droid,
the protocol droid.
They put she's in the Falcon.
I thought it was really interesting. They bring in Jellicoe and Nechayev, who are 2 of the more well-developed admirals on screen in Star Trek. And I do think we didn't get a good taste of that necessarily in these first 4 novellas, but their almost buddy cop relationship in future books where they kind of like clash over what they want the crew to do always cracked me up. And I like that, like, Jellicoe approaches Shelby and is like, hey, you're going to be my spy. And she's like, no, I'm not. I agree with you on everything except that if I'm his first officer, you can go to hell. And I liked that so much.
That's kind of the part I was just getting to. Yep.
Yes, good.
Stephen, did you get to the part at all where you see Calhoun on the ship talking to the crew or anything like that?
Yeah. He was just starting to talk to the different Salar and He was talking to Shelby. That's where I got it.
Okay. Yeah.
They were just talking about that specific thing, like, well, you're either here for this as a spy or you're here.
Yeah, I love that bit. Just him laying out those exact possibilities. God, and that actually killed me when I was I can get like almost picture where I was today earlier when I was hearing just the bit with him talking to Salar and just doing one of those Sam Jackson type routines of like, were you lovers at some point? Did he,
Yes.
was he in a play? Was it all these things? What do you mean performance?
So far, I enjoyed his informal management stuff.
Do you realize that Calhoun is also Spider-Man? Because he's got the Spidey sense, right? Like he can sense when somebody's about to attack him from behind and duck.
Right.
Are you
David writes a lot of comic books. He wrote for Marvel in the 90s, so that makes sense.
Are you exaggerating, or did they actually spell out that he could do? I'm trying to remember.
They did not say Spidey sense, but they said like he got a tingling and he ducked, and then like a sword swung over his head, and that kind of thing happened several times. The first four.
Do you think that's something that's supposed to be unique to? I'm sorry, unique to him or his race?
It seems to be unique to him, and then he also has those visions, so I think it's all kind of connected. I don't remember if there's ever further explanation of that or not. Also, they mentioned that he quit Starfleet for a while. He's kind of like a cowboy on the frontier. He's kind of a spy. That reminds me very heavily of Section 31, which has not been introduced on screen yet, but will be soon, of
on the new frontier.
elite Black Ops branch that's officially doesn't exist. But Steven would have seen him in Section 31 in Star Trek Discovery.
Right.
But Section 31 is first introduced in Star Trek Deep Space Nine, so we haven't been at them yet in our
has that been hinted at yet? I feel like it was.
Well, I mean, in later canon and non-canon in the books, they tie stuff that happened back in the original series and Next Gen into Section 31, which makes a lot of sense, that we just weren't aware of the covert organization. It's always been there.
No, I mean on screen in TNG and DS9, I feel like didn't Section 31 get mentioned recently?
Not that we've watched in this podcast. That comes later in DS9.
Huh.
So we're not there yet. The Mark McHenry is one of my absolute favorite characters in Star Trek books. I know you haven't read a lot of him, Steven, but I love this idea of this genius who looks like he's asleep but is hyper aware and knows all this stuff. And there's even a scene like in book 4 of this novella where there's a fight going down and McHenry takes the time to dump a bunch of chips down his shirt because they're really good chips, and he prioritizes, and he knows he's going to have to flee here. He's not going to get in the physical fight, so he's not needed at the moment, but he's going to stuff all the chips down his shirt. Like, McHenry is such an oddball. I really like him. I feel like he's Wesley times 10 in the way he perceives the universe, which just begs the question, why doesn't the Traveler ever come from McHenry?
Well, and this is another one. I'm on the Wikipedia page. This gets weird. His great grandparents are the Greek god Apollo, and
yes, I remember that.
Ptolemus.
I did read far enough to get to that. It's not in the first 4, but I remember that from
so that
books.
Oh, from like the TOS episodes of like the gods or something.
Wars for Adonis, Which we have that creepy rape scene essentially.
Yeah.
In what?
In Who Mourns for Adonis.
Oh.
Yeah. I mean, I know it's like, well, which episode are you referring to?
No, I didn't mean I wasn't sure if I missed something from the book or if it was
Although I guess to be fair, that's what the Greek gods did. I mean, even in the mythology, it's Action Earth woman. Yeah, they did not know that no meant no. That's for sure.
Yeah, they play with the gray area of like turning into animals. Like, well, animals don't know any better.
What the god need with a mortal? Well, they knock them up.
So that was funny that you asked that, because there was an exact exchange that I sent you guys from the book of what does God need with a starship? Well, I guess we finally answered that question to get to the other side, which I really liked. Peter David's tribute to other Star Trek, like the climax in the 4th book is essentially Star Trek, the end of Star Trek 3, combined with a little bit of Star Trek 5. Like, I like that he like ties that together. I also really love his dialogue. Like, Salita's saying, it's going to take time to make a full analysis. And Callan's like, fine, you've got 20 seconds. And Salita's like, I appreciate the leisure time, sir. The dialogue is just, to me, is really good. I liked in book 2 that basically Kibrin and Saquon are sent on a buddy road trip for the rest of the novellas. Stephen's got to that, but I love that. And I love the competing captain and first officer's logs in books 3 and 4.
Ah.
We get Shelby's and Calhoun's back-to-back version of events.
Oh, those are fun. That kind of thing.
Fun.
Did that happen in? Shelby was in. Was it Yesterday's Enterprise? She was in.
No, she was in Best of Both Worlds.
Best of Both Worlds. Does that happen in there? Does she have a log?
I think so.
Okay. Maybe I'm wishing for it.
Just a few other little notes from books 3 and 4. I won't get into them deep because I know Stephen hasn't read it, but there is a mention. Dr. Salar mentions there was a cadet named Finnegan that pushed her into a pool. And I was like, it's still happening generations later. Darn Finnegan. Because Finnegan always bullied Kirk at the academy.
Oh, wow.
Yep. There's a part in book 4 where they basically say Calhoun is a terrorist. It just depends on who the victors write history, right? Kind of similar to how Kira can be seen as a terrorist. I really liked that. There's a lot of foreshadowing in this book to what the ultimate climax is. Again, I don't want to spoil it for Stephen, but Keith, if you remember how this ends for the planet in question, it is mentioned early on, right away. Like 2 of the characters say it.
So that was for me. That was like in the last 8 minutes of the recording, as I recall. Because I was actually in
on mute. So real quick, while he's on mute, sorry, Keith. Is page 30 of the book 4? It actually says you act like this planet's going to crack open like a giant egg, and they laugh it off and keep going.
Now that you mentioned, I remember that now. It was such a quick little thing. I kept going on. Wait. No.
Oh, sorry. No, stop.
I was gonna say just the bit about the blessing, the bird of the galaxy,
the great bird of the galaxy roost on your planet.
I didn't see it coming, and I was in the car listening like the last bit of it, and just it cracked me up, and I realized what I was like, God, I can't believe you just did that. The whole
they set it up so beautifully, like foreshadowing, that when you reread it, it's like, oh my God, you're so freaking obvious what's happening.
And
but I love that.
Yeah, and then also I was also laughing because of just reminded me of one of Steven's least favorite tropes, I think, or rather, no, it's more of like one of the comedic sort of tropes of Star Trek. And I think that'll, if he does get to it, maybe he'll know what I'm talking about. I thought of that immediately. It was just, my God.
So something Stephen would be interested in, and not to go back to things, but they do mention the Great Bird of the Galaxy as a myth in this book. And of course, the Great Bird of the Galaxy was Gene Roddenberry.
Yeah.
So I love that callback. Gene Roddenberry was always called the Great Bird of the Galaxy.
I did not know that.
Yeah. So when a character talks about a myth of the great, says, a saying of my people is, may the Great Bird of the Galaxy roost on your planet. I was like, nice. I like it. This isn't a spoiler, but there's a part of book 4 where they're talking about things they've done to try to subdue Zach Kibrin, the aliens are. And it's totally like Ant-Man, where Louise goes, it's not Louise Guzman, what's the actor's name? Whatever, goes back and gives you the flashback to what happens. Yeah. So they're like, have you tried this with Zach Kibrin? Yes, we did. And they flash back and they give you the scene. Well, have you tried this? Yep. And they flash back and they give you the scene. Well, this? Yep. And they flash back and they give you the scene. And I love that rather than just telling us a narrative. It's like the henchman talking to the villain of all the different things they tried. It's really funny the way they did it. That's all I'm going to notes, because I don't want to spoil things for Stephen coming up, but I just really love the tone, really love the style. These remain some of my favorite Star Trek books. I did mark them all on Goodreads as I went, and I did give the first one 5 stars, and 2 through 4 all got 4 stars, because I did think there were some weakness, but still like top of my list for Star Trek novels. I think I liked these better than Imzadi, which is the only other book we've read for this podcast. So, but I think that was mainly because of the more freedom he was given here, whereas Imzadi had to fit so much into canon that's already established. Yeah. Taking the shackles off Peter David, he was the right author to choose to do this. And I really, at the time, wanted this adapted to screen so much. I know at this point, the actors that appeared on screen, like Ashley Judd and the woman that played Shelby, all of a sudden I can't remember, but I do know her name.
Elizabeth.
They're too old to now play those characters. on screen, but you could do it as an animated adaptation. And I think for New Frontier, animation might work better anyway. I would love to see New Frontier be the next animated Star Trek. I don't think they should get Mel Gibson to voice Calhoun, but somebody else. But yeah, if you bring back the actors that played Shelby and Salar and Robin Leffler and add in some good, obviously Fred Tachione is probably going to play Saquon or Kebron or both, but right. But yeah, Jeffrey Combs needs to play a character, but let's do it. New Frontier still deserves to make it into the canon somehow. I would really like to see that.
Her name is Elizabeth Dennehy.
Yes, thank you.
Why would it be Mel Gibson?
That's who the character was based on, but specifically his role in Braveheart. That character he played in Braveheart. Although they said, I guess in his research to develop the character, he went beyond the movie and actually looked into the real guy more. But Mel Gibson was an influence.
Did Braveheart run away? Did Payback run away?
Yeah, I think Callan's a different breed of captain, and I like it. Even though he looks like a straight white man, which is a little done in Star Trek. They gave plenty of other characters more prevalence in this. And Shelby is, I love to see Shelby. She's such a good foil for him, and to see her develop more.
That's interesting because it's
highly rated.
It's not what I pictured listening to it, certainly. As far as how Calhoun looked, because I guess of the accents that he was giving some of the characters from the Twin Aliens. Yes, that was the further thing from my imagination.
I kind of always picture him a little closer to Billy Campbell, a little outrageous Okada type, a little bit too. But anyway, that's all I got. Any other final thoughts you want to talk about New Frontier before we wrap this up?
Well, just as I was starting to say, just the for the choices that Joe Morton was making, he was giving a lot of those aliens more like a primitive accent. If it's I'm not sure how to describe that exactly. Some of the
like stilted English kind of thing. Like stilted English.
A little bit, yeah. Sometimes as far as the differences to differentiate between Calhoun's people and Thelonians and so forth.
That's what the universal translator does to those people on other planets. It makes it sound that way because it's just not completely effective.
Well, thank you both for diving into New Frontier with me. Yeah. Hope that you keep reading and enjoy the series.
I'm going to. That's my thought.
At some point, we should definitely pick another Star Trek book to read. Maybe one not by Peter David for once.
Yeah.
But why?
I love Peter David. There's more Peter David I could definitely recommend. But perhaps Shatner wrote a bunch of novels, one of them taking place in the aftermath of Star Trek Generations. So maybe that'd be a good one for next year.
Yeah.
Well, it's Shatner and Judith and Garfield Reeves Stevens, husband-wife writing team, co-wrote all his Star Trek novels. But they did like 12, starting with The Ashes of Eden. So maybe that's a good choice. I don't know. There's some other books, but I know we've got some other bonus episodes for Patreon donors. So go to patreon.com/IBD, get our other bonuses, and we'll be back soon enough with Deep Space Nine Season 3. Until then, live long.
And keep on reading and reaching for the stars and prosper.
May the great bird of the galaxy roost on your planet.
Fantastic.
It's All Been Done presents
Who's Got the Time?